Let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're unpacking a text that has literally sat on the desks of leaders and strategists for decades. But right off the bat, there's this massive misconception we need to clear up. Most people assume Sun Tzu's famous text is about fighting. It's actually not. And honestly, that simple misreading completely explains why so many smart people keep losing battles they never had to fight in the first place.
So, let me ask you something. Have you ever felt like you lost a negotiation before it even began? Think about it. A high-stakes job interview, a really tough conversation, maybe a big business deal where you walked in totally unprepared, just kind of crossing your fingers and hoping good vibes would carry you through. Then, you sit down and bam, you realize the other person is 3 steps ahead, and you're just improvising. We've all been there, right? That terrible sinking feeling in your stomach? That is exactly what happens when you don't understand the real nature of strategy.
Here's the roadmap for this explainer. We'll start with the undefeated position, move into the 5 core pillars, take an objective look at where Sun Tzu fails, check out some modern comparisons, and wrap up with practical actions you can actually use.
All right, part 1, the undefeated position.
Why do incredibly smart, talented people keep losing in modern settings? Well, the core problem isn't usually a lack of resources or talent. It's often this massive overconfidence in our own strengths, combined with a total blindness to our weaknesses. Sun Tzu had a very specific concept for solving this, known as shi, or strategic advantage. It's basically the act of winning before the moment arrives by setting up your position correctly. The crucial takeaway here is that true strategy is about making losing nearly impossible before a contest even begins. You don't win by just fighting harder in the heat of the moment. No, you win by setting up your position so correctly in advance that the outcome is basically inevitable. As the source notes, the general who wins without fighting is the truly superior general.
Picture this. An unprepared startup founder walks into a huge retail pitch with an amazing product, relying purely on her enthusiasm. But unfortunately, good vibes don't cover questions about minimum order quantities, and she just freezes. She didn't do the homework. Now contrast that with the prepared founder who researched exactly what that specific buyer needed beforehand. The unprepared founder didn't lose because her product was worse, right? She lost deals she could have easily won simply because she didn't know the terrain.
Moving on to part 2, 5 core strategic pillars.
If we distill the original 13 chapters down, the very first pillar is probably the most famous. Know yourself and know your enemy. Now, there is often a massive gap between what you think you know and what you actually know. People just love to rely on their self-image instead of clear-eyed, factual intelligence. Sun Tzu insists on a brutal, honest inventory of your actual strengths and your real knowledge gaps. Because if you walk into a room just assuming the other side thinks roughly the way you do, that assumption is exactly how you get destroyed.
Beyond knowing yourself, the other pillars are just as vital. We've got win without fighting, which, as we discussed, is all about positioning yourself early. Then there's adaptability over rigid plans, and what's super fascinating here is that Sun Tzu actually warned against fixed formulas. He compared a good strategist to water naturally shaping itself to the ground. Then we have intelligence and information. The text literally argues that refusing to gather information is basically a form of inhumanity, because it practically guarantees unnecessary loss. And finally, we have the indirect approach.
Let's actually zoom in on that last one for a second. The indirect approach, attacking emptiness rather than fullness. This is such a brilliant tactic. The source explains that when you're outmatched in resources or power, you absolutely do not launch a direct assault against a prepared defense. Instead, you find the unoccupied terrain. You find the exact questions your competitor isn't answering, the specific customers they're ignoring, or the problems they're leaving totally unsolved, and you go dominate that space instead.
Which brings us to part 3, where Sun Tzu fails. We've got to be objective here. No text is perfect. Any good piece of thinking has its blind spots, and honestly, adopting a 2,500-year-old military manual entirely into your modern life without any kind of filter can actually be pretty dangerous. So let's impartially unpack these flaws straight from the source's critique. First off, the text assumes a zero-sum world. In ancient warfare, sure, there's a clear winner and loser. But today, adopting a toxic zero-sum framing is just going to isolate you and destroy any collaborative trust. Second, it openly promotes deception, which, let's face it, can completely ruin your long-term reputation in business or personal relationships. Third, remember it was written for generals commanding thousands of troops, not a modern individual navigating a career. And finally, it simply predates modern negotiation science, behavioral economics, and organizational psychology by literally thousands of years.
So the crucial takeaway here is to treat this text like a chess manual, not some overarching life philosophy. The absolute most effective way to use this book is to extract its tactical insights, like positioning and information gathering, without adopting its fundamentally adversarial, manipulative worldview.
All right, Part 4, Modern Strategy Comparisons.
To really grasp the value of this ancient text, it helps to look at how beautifully these modern, evidence-based philosophies contrast and complement each other. Take atomic habits, for example. That's all about cumulative systems, building up your baseline capacity over time. The art of war, on the other hand, is about deciding when and how to actually deploy that capacity. They solve totally different problems. Then compare it to getting to yes, which is way superior for ongoing relationships because the whole goal is resolving agreements, not just defeating an opponent. And when put next to the 48 laws of power, which really amplifies those power dynamics, Sun Tzu acts kind of like the original source code.
And finally, Part 5, Practical Actions for Today.
I promised you immediate, actionable steps derived directly from this source material, and here is exactly how you can apply this thinking this very week. First up, find the unoccupied terrain. Remember that indirect approach we talked about? Don't compete where everyone else is already strong. The source uses this great example of a streaming service. Back in 2010, instead of trying to fight Netflix directly on general entertainment, a smart company would focus on dominating documentaries, the exact terrain Netflix was ignoring at the time. Or imagine a tech marketer competing against 80 other applicants. Instead of just listing generic skills, she tailors her entire job application around a specific regional gap the company hasn't filled yet. You have to stop trying to be a slightly better version of everyone else and claim the unoccupied space.
Next is the intelligence audit. You should absolutely try this for your next salary negotiation or a challenging project. Step 1. Write down what you actually know from hard evidence, not assumptions. Step 2. Write down what you don't know but could realistically find out with a little bit of effort. Step 3. Go do the research, ask the hard questions, and fill that gap. Information acts as the ultimate leverage. Think about it. When you know exactly what a role pays elsewhere and the precise pain points your employer is trying to solve, you aren't just defending a number anymore. You are providing a solution on your own terms.
And that brilliantly sets up our final action, the pre-mortem. Honestly, this is the absolute fastest, lowest effort way to map the terrain before any big conversation. Just take 10 minutes before an important meeting and write down every single way it could go sideways. What if they say no? What if they literally laugh you right out of the room? What is your walkaway position? Write it all out and prepare your response for each scenario. Just doing this one thing puts you ahead of 90% of people who walk into those exact same situations completely blind.
As we wrap up this explainer, let's neutrally summarize who the source material actually says will benefit from this text. So who should read it? The unprepared, or people working in highly competitive environments who are just frustrated by losing the same fights over and over again? And who should skip it? Well, anyone looking for a values-based life philosophy, or someone who is already highly paranoid and prone to seeing absolutely everyone as a potential threat. For them, this text will actively be harmful to their mindset.
But the absolutely crucial point to take away from this entire explainer is this. Preparation, positioning, and information gathering are not bureaucratic steps. They are the work. Everything else is just execution. True success happens long before that execution phase even begins.
Which leaves us with this final provocative thought. I want you to look at your own life and ask yourself, what is the unoccupied terrain in your own career right now, and how are you going to claim it before the battle even begins? Stop fighting where everyone else is strong. Find the emptiness, do your pre-mortem, and win the game before you even sit down at the table. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and I can't wait to dive into our next topic with you.